Hi, welcome to this part of my guide and review of the FlexTale Solo Adventuring Toolkit. If you haven't seen the other parts, please check out the playlist in the description below. It is in this series of videos that I am trying to give my thoughts and opinions and tips on how to use the Solo Adventuring Toolkit. This time we are going to take a look at a couple of sections that I wouldn't consider to be particularly useful when compared to the rest of the book. However, there is another section that we are going to check out today that I would consider fundamental when it comes to running a pre-generated module. That is, if you want to play as a solo player character with an adventure module without a game master, this section contains the general process to do so. Let's talk about the less important sections first. You have a section called How to Use the Solo Adventuring Toolkit. This is pretty basic. Some could consider it a bit redundant. Others would perhaps look at this section and could think that it reinforces the concepts, but it feels like it repeats a bit of the information that we have previously discussed in other parts, because they tell you the general purpose of the Solo Adventuring Toolkit, that you can use it to run solo and traditional adventures, that is with your group or alone or cooperatively without a game master. So here you have a discussion on how to handle things with small groups, on how to make the characters a bit stronger with some features that we will talk about in future parts of this review. You also have a discussion on the challenges, the risks, the accelerated creation of player characters. That is, if you want to create a player character that is level 5 or 10 or whatever, instead of just a first level, with the purpose of making the character stronger to take on, yes, greater challenges. You also have information on how to adapt adventure content to your own purposes, but they are just very basic tips. And like I said, if you watch the other parts, we have already discussed a bit about that. So you have information on how to improve as a player, as a game master. That is, as a player you may learn to appreciate the elements of the game and most of the adventuring parties that you may never have gravitated towards, because when you are playing a solo role-playing game, maybe you are controlling classes that are out of your area of expertise. When it comes to a game master, it gives you a perspective or a point of view on how a player could experience an adventure. So pretty basic overall. And then we have a section called Requirements, Options and Tools. And we have already talked a bit about this. In fact, this section, like a previous section, feels a bit more like a promotional blurb, because here they tell you, well, the Solo Adventuring Toolkit works great on its own, but if you want, you can get the Solo Character Compendium, which contains pre-generated player characters for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. They also mention the Aquila Bestiary of the Realm. All of that is produced by the same publisher, by IGS. And well, all of the products that I have purchased from IGS are great. They have become my favorite tools in solo gaming. The Flex AI guidebook, the encounter generator, that one is okay, but I think it's more recommended for someone who wants to add greater detail, like what did you find inside of that sack, inside of that barrel, on that table, on the desk, inside the drawers, etc. Things like that. Although you do have a nice system to generate traps. But when it comes to like requirements, options and tools, they just mention the IGS products and pretty much nothing else. So I would have liked it if they added recommendations for products outside of the range of IGS. So in order to better support this section, I am going to put a video in the description where I recommend several emulators, oracles, many things that you can use in your solo adventures. Now, moving on from this section, you have a very important section of the book. This is the player role versus GM role. I am going to read some key paragraphs and I will give you my opinion on them. In a traditional tabletop role-playing game experience, there are two very distinct and important roles, the game master and the player. These two roles are both essential. That statement holds for the solo experience as well. It must be admitted that this approach is in part how the Solo Adventuring Toolkit goes about the solo experience. So this starts as an introduction to the main problem when running a pre-generated module with you as a player character. You need to have a simulated game master. Or, as I mentioned many times, because some people are not aware of the method, you can use Abraham's method. You will see the link in the description below to run the adventure as a solo game master with emulated player characters. So here they mention some different things, different ways to play. By first understanding the player role. Each player guides the actions of a single character, unless you are playing a role-playing game like Dungeon Crawl Classics, where you control several player characters. It is common to control a single player character in a traditional RPG experience with your group. So there is a one-to-one relationship between player and player character, and it can result in a blurring on who is being targeted. That is the typical I hit the enemy with my sword, or I cast this spell, then you are talking as your player character. But there are also some players that like to say, my character Druganor attacks this gnoll with a fireball, or my character Tarantil uses his spear against the basilisk, and things like that. So here they are talking about that degree of getting too close or perhaps too distant to your character. And no matter how you want to handle it, this is unchanged in a solo experience. Then they talk about the game master role. And here they talk about how the game master is in a way simulated by the rules, by the tables, by the oracles, by the emulators, but in another sense, you are still participating as a game master to a certain degree. That is, you are adjudicating things, you sometimes need to make some judgment calls, but as I mentioned, you can use Abraham's method to participate as a game master completely into the role, while the player characters take a more distant approach. That is, you have a simulation of player characters, or rather an emulation. You still need to make some judgment calls as well. If you are using the Flex AI guidebook to determine the artificial intelligence of the player characters during a combat scenario, you still have to apply certain results from the tables. And it is from this interaction, this back and forth, that results in the creation of a story. Not that you are telling a story by itself. The story will spring forth on its own because of the outcomes of different skill checks, the interaction between different non-player characters and player characters, etc. Then we have more information on the social role in solo play. As you solo play, the toolkit will generate stories, encounters, and other gaming elements that will give you inspiration for your role as a game master in traditional gaming. That is, you can use things from this toolkit to use in your traditional sessions. Solo playing classes you may not have experience with may give you a better understanding of the role of those classes, and at the same time, facing new and dynamically generated challenges using these classes in solo play may provide insight into new, different ways to defeat similar such obstacles in traditional play. And it is quite obvious that you can discuss this with other solo players. So there is still that social solo component. But what we are interested in is in how to replicate the party experience, or the experience of going into a pre-generated module. The party experience is somewhat difficult because when it comes to the art of solo self-delusion, into creating this fantasy in which you are participating as a player character with an artificial game master, that is, you do not think he or she is artificial, but it's someone there running things. And it can go the other way around with Abraham's method. You are playing as a solo game master with these simulated, or rather emulated players or player characters that go through your adventures. But when it comes to running a pre-generated module, there is the problem of secret information. You already know the plotline, the different roles of the non-player characters, their agendas, their hidden motives. And how can you play a solo adventure module if you already know what is going to happen? You are not going to surprise yourself, and you're going to be cheating if you act on the knowledge that you already possess as a player character. You already know what is going to happen. You already know that in that room there are traps. When a treasure is cursed, you already know what is going to happen if you talk with a particular non-player character, if that non-player character is helpful, if he is actually an enemy in disguise, all of that. I actually made a video a few months back where I talk about this problem of secret information, and I recommend that you watch that video after this one, so that you get more information on how to run a pre-generated module, because I think that the information that I'm going to talk about here, it works well with the tips that I gave in that video and that I'm going to repeat briefly in a few moments. So these things are impossible to play towards without cheating, but there are some ways to go around this. Obfuscation is key. Obfuscation can be thought of as the art of hiding something. Simply put, it's not a surprise or a secret if you already know about it. So the best way to keep secret content secret is to not tell yourself. This is tricky to pull off. The two ways proposed in this book are late determination and intentional as-trace. Let's talk about late determination first. This is just in-time decision making. That is, you see the results at the same time you are making those rolls in the tables. This is how most conventional solo adventures, that is, when you are participating as a player character and you have your Oracle or your Game Master emulator, you are making those rolls to see what is behind that door, what you find in a particular section or area, how the non-player character is going to react, what sorts of things you encounter in the chamber or in the hallway, etc. This approach prevents the solo player from taking actions based on unintentional knowledge. So because you do not know what is behind that door, what lies in the corridor, the agenda, the purpose, the plans of a particular non-player character, you can still act, use your skills, your spells, your abilities, making decisions, taking particular approaches, and you still feel like you are being challenged. It's not as easy as just acting on previously obtained information. You do not know what is going to happen, and you're trying to solve those problems, you're trying to complete those quests. But the other approach, intentional as-trace, is all about handling pre-generated modules. When you are not using late determination and generating your own dynamic adventure content, you will unavoidably be in possession of knowledge that an equivalent group of traditional player characters would not have. One way of still keeping some realism is to introduce intentional as-trace into your solo adventuring. These as-trace are purposefully fruitless endeavors. This means that when you are looking for a secret door in a room where you already know that there is a secret door there, when using this intentional as-trace method, maybe there is no door, even though the adventure module indicates that there is a secret doorway, that there is a passageway, that there is hidden treasure, or perhaps there is an invisible non-player character. Anything that you cannot perceive at first glance, or any secret, can be randomized using this intentional as-trace system. And here they do not put so much emphasis into it, and I consider it a bit of a flaw because this has a lot of potential. It shouldn't be just applied to an adventure site. It could also be applied to the plotline, to the social interactions. If you are talking with a non-player character and you know in the module it says something like, if you talk to this queen or that prince or this knight, they are going to give you clues on how to solve this particular mystery, make a roll of intentional as-trace on the as-trace table, and maybe it's a waste of time or it takes you into another direction entirely. Here they also give you some alternative ways on how to approach the situation, because for example, many solo players sometimes do not know how to handle traps or secrets in rooms. There are many ways to do this. I think that one of my favorite ways to handle this, well, I'm going to put a link in the description below to my video where I talk about handling traps in solo role-playing games. But one way to do this, if you think that there is some sort of secret or trap in a room, you can make your trap perception roll, depending on the system, or to find traps, disarm mechanisms, etc., and see if you are successful. So if you are successful or unsuccessful, there could be some consequences. You could make a roll like a percentage roll, if you roll 5 or 10% below, maybe there is actually a trap or a secret door or something. But maybe you could think, well, something in the map makes me think that there is going to be a trap or maybe a secret door, because you take a look at the map and it's pretty close to a treasure vault, so maybe there are traps there. And you make a roll. If you roll below 15 or 20%, then there is a chance, there is actually a confirmed trap there. But maybe depending on the way that you drew the map, that is, you were exploring the dungeon and you see that there is this blank space between all of the other rooms, it's logical to think that perhaps there is a secret chamber there. So if you search for secret doors, let's say in the east room, adjacent to that blank space, and it resulted in a success, you found a secret door, but you make your roll and you determine, well, there is a 30% chance that there is a chamber there, like a secret chamber, and you make the roll, and oh, there was a chamber, and you managed to do it. But if you failed in your find secret doors check, you only get one chance. That is a recommendation of the Solo Adventuring Toolkit, because you're going to be aware of the different rooms, corridors, traps, etc. It's fair that you only get one chance, one single roll, to see if you find that secret. So even if you made your percentage roll and oh, there is a secret door there, but you couldn't find it based on your skill check, then you cannot find it for the rest of the adventure. That is lost. And even if it contains some vital piece of information or some artifact needed to solve the adventure, well, you will have to rely on the tables of the Solo Adventuring Toolkit to find other avenues to find that item or that clue. So, like I said, here they do give you some alternative ways. The ways that I told you about just now were just my ideas on that, but here they give you some other options, very similar options. For example, they tell you, you could count up all of the rooms in a dungeon and count the subset of those that contain secrets, and then figure you have the percentage chance of discovering any given secret. This feels robust but wasteful and overly mathematical, but it's still a way to do it. So maybe you count the rooms and you determine, well, there is a 15% chance that you can find secrets in this or that place. You could use that. Or you can use the intentional ashtrays tables. So how do you do this? Let's say that you are using your pre-generated module, some dungeon or whatever, and you approach this area and you see in the map that there is a secret tunnel. So you approach the area of the secret tunnel, you make your roll with your rogue or whatever, or maybe it depends on the system, right? Maybe you're doing an ability check based on other things, and you make a roll on the intentional ashtrays. It is also color-coded or divided by difficulty. There are some dungeons that are going to be more difficult when it comes to finding their secrets or unraveling their mysteries and all of that. If you use the... I can never tell if it's like dark gray or blue, the color in the right side. It kind of looks like blackish or grayish. Let's call it section D. If you use section D, it's going to be more likely that you won't find anything. It's going to be a missed opportunity. But if you want easier results, you can use section C. If you want things to be a bit harder, you can use B or section A. So maybe you obtain the result of astray, roll again afterwards, or astray, progress afterwards, or proceed with knowledge. Proceed with knowledge is the best result. This is basically you proceeding with what you already know of the module. But when it comes to ashtrays, you need to roll on additional tables. Maybe it's a time-wasted astray roll. So maybe the result is you spend 20 times the time that you would normally need to search that particular section of a room, or maybe just 10 times. Regardless of this result, it's going to take many turns of searching, and because of this, it's going to result in random encounter chances. It depends on the dungeon, so depending on how often you need to make a roll to see if there is a wandering monster encounter, or maybe there is some other hazard or something related to the mission. Maybe you have a limited number of rounds to finish the dungeon. There is a countdown because some sort of ritual is being carried out, or maybe someone is about to be sacrificed, or maybe you need to find the vampire before the sun sets. It's all about that. But there could be some other astray results. Maybe you encounter a trap. Maybe you suffer environmental damage. You know, maybe you're looking for that secret stone door and suddenly some rocks or bricks start falling over you. The section was quite fragile and you take damage because of it. Or maybe you encounter some sort of obstacle, you need to take another route, or maybe there is additional time lost. Maybe you end up with bad luck. You need to reroll on the table and you suffer a disadvantage on any saves, and damage rolls against you during this astray have an advantage. So maybe the place was cursed. So there are several results with additional consequences, and they also serve as examples for you to create your own tables, customized for the adventure module that you are running. For example, there are some modules where several events happen after different time goals or time limits. So if you take this number of days in finishing a particular adventure site, there is going to be a trigger effect or trigger event, and this army is going to destroy this village. Or this spell is going to be unleashed and now you're going to have a penalty to all of your rolls. Or it could be whatever. Oh, or perhaps these magical items are going to be stolen, and when you get to that room, they are not going to be there anymore. So it's all about that, these additional consequences. And that's about it when it comes to this section. I recommend that you write down the pages or that you print them, because these tables are somewhat difficult to find in this book. That is, they are going to be pages 79, 80, and 81. They are the tables that you're going to be using to run solo adventure modules, solo pre-generated adventure modules. But I think there is a bit of a missed potential when it comes to the explanation here. Like I said, you can apply this to many things in the adventure, for pretty much anything in the adventure. And here is where I give you some additional tips. In the video that I'm going to link in the description below, I mentioned that when it comes to running pre-generated adventure modules as a solo experience, you should chop them up, cut them up completely. Separate the rooms, the non-player characters, the traps, the puzzles, the different sections of the plotline, and create tables with them. So every time you are proceeding in your solo adventure, roll on those tables to build your own encounters. And you can combine that with these astray tables. So maybe you have an adventure where you had vampires inside of a coffin, and you think that's pretty logical within the fictional context. So maybe you leave that chamber intact, you only randomize some items found there, the architecture, the way that that section of the dungeon is connected to the rest of the corridors and the rooms. So you are generating things randomly, and you finally reach the crypt of the vampire. The vampire is supposed to be in the sarcophagus or the coffin or whatever, you know it. So you get close to the sarcophagus, you decide to go all out and just face the vampire quite straightforward, and you open the sarcophagus. And depending on the tables, depending if you are using the tables as they are written here in the solo toolkit, or if you have customized your own tables, maybe the vampire is not there. That means the vampire is away, maybe attacking a victim or searching for you in another place of the dungeon. But maybe the vampire is there, but you take a lot of time trying to open the coffin. Maybe it's quite sealed or locked in some magical way. And then you need to make some rolls for random monsters or wandering monsters, and now you have to fight against the vampire and other monsters. Or maybe the coffin, or like I said, sarcophagus or whatever, was trapped. Or maybe you suffer some environmental damage. Maybe there was like this cloud of fungi that just exploded into your face as you opened the coffin. Or maybe there is some other obstacle, etc. Like I said, the bad luck that you end up cursed. So that way you can randomize every encounter, every section of your pre-generated adventure module. But don't stop there. Use these intentional ashtrays, these tables, in plotlines. When you talk to a non-player character that was supposed to be the villain, maybe he ends up being the good guy. If you talk with a non-player character that was supposed to be your ally or your friend, maybe that non-player character is now the main villain of the module. anything can be randomized to the degree that you want it to be. You can only randomize some sections of the adventure. You can randomize the entire adventure module. And this concludes this part of the guide and review for today. As you can see, now you can use any of your pre-generated adventure modules, all of those short campaigns or longer campaigns or any mega dungeon or a typical adventure that you wanted to run with a group, but your players were not interested or you do not have a group at the moment. Now you can run it solo and randomize things within it so that you surprise yourself with what you encounter in each chamber, in each corridor, in each section of the woods, of the swamps, and with each non-player character interaction. Well, thanks for watching this part of the guide and review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. Remember to check out the videos in the description below for additional tips and advice. Thanks again, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. See you later.